Okay, very good. Well, welcome everybody. I think we're on our 4th session now. So I think most of you have actually been with us for all of the sessions. Thank you so much again for giving up another hour of your morning. Today, we're going to be talking about construction coordination, but before I kind of jump into that, I just wanted to address the FEMA appeal work that we talked about last week. I didn't want to mix with the schedule too much, so obviously we're going to do construction today, and then next Thursday will be the part 2 of the FEMA appeal work with Myrna and Evan. So I hope you all got that message in the email I sent out, but yeah, so we'll pick that up again for sure next Thursday, and then I'll kick back the outreach and client storytelling one to the following week. So everything will still happen, it'll just shift a week. But yeah, so thank you again. Thanks for putting your names in the chat. If you're just joining us, if you can put your name and organization in there, that's super helpful. So today, yeah, so I've talked to all of you, obviously, lots. There's been a few different questions that have come up, I think, thematically from no matter where you are in the US. And so I was really excited to have our team member, Hannah, who works in our New Orleans construction department, but has worked kind of all across the US and so has really good context of how it works everywhere, to put this presentation together that, again, it's like not able to be super specific for all your different locations and types of NGOs, but I think it'll broadly cover a lot of good information. And then any questions we have, we can take at the end. Hannah's works with our director of construction. His name is Tommy. And so if there's any like super technical questions that Hannah or I can't answer, I will make notes of them and we'll get with Tommy and get back to you. So like Hannah and I are not construction professionals, like really. So if we can't answer it, we'll find out for you. So I just want to put that little like caveat out there. So with that, I will hand it over to Hannah. Hannah's our New Orleans and Southeast Louisiana, because we're still doing our Katrina work, but now we have lots of Ida work too. So she kind of manages both of those major projects. And she's the project manager for us out of headquarters. So excited to have her with us. I will mute myself and hand it to Hannah.
All right, hello everyone. Nice to see everyone's faces this morning. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick.
And I'll be checking the chat for questions too, kind of similar how we did last week. So if you put your questions in the chat, I'll answer, or we can get to it at the end too, just so that we can keep rolling. Cool.
All right, so just to get started, obviously this is module 4, construction coordination. And before we get started, I want to put out an action item for everyone. And I think maybe Angela could type it in the chat so everyone knows what the action item is. But post training, the action item that I'm asking of all of y'all is that you take the next 3 business days, so Friday, Monday, Tuesday, to assess all of your subcontractor pool and their documentation, whether they do or do not have documentation, checking for proof of insurance and W-9 and a license. So we're going to get into more details on how to choose, a subcontractor, how to work with them, but just throwing out the action item post training this morning. So Angela, if you can type that into the chat, that would be great. And yeah. So why this matters, why this particular training matters, why construction coordination matters. So essentially, as nonprofits, we want to do right by our grantors. And that means we want to spend and utilize the funds as efficiently as possible. So that means having cost-efficient budgets, having cost-efficient estimates, and in turn, being able to get more families home, more vulnerable folks home. And that's part of why this particular training matters. And to speak to the number 354, this is the number of homes last year that all of our share grantees combined, number of families home that they brought. So 354. And the reason why Angela and I wanted to share that number is because it does represent a huge amount of impact that organizations like yourselves have been able to support. But in addition to that, taking it one step further and thinking, what if every single budget and job that we conducted or that grantee conducted was cost efficient? Maybe we could have gotten an additional, 100 families home. So that's why this matters. We want to make sure we're being efficient in our costs on all of our jobs, and that we are assessing things that are storm related and in turn getting more families home. So just something to set the tone for why this training matters. All right, so just a little agenda for what I will be covering. To start, we're going to go over how to choose the best subcontractor, the details behind that, recommendations from SVP on how to choose reliable subs. Second, we're going to kind of go a little bit in depth on how to do a damage assessment, meaning post hurricane, post tornado, post some kind of storm, how to walk through a home and some simple steps to take to assess damage. To kind of loop into that, identifying mechanical, electrical, plumbing problems, as we call them in short, MEP. Essentially, these are the mechanicals and sometimes the high ticket items that could bump up your costs on your jobs if you don't identify them properly prior to approving a client's home for rebuild. Fourth is we're going to just do a little reminder on qualifications for repairs. So that means, what qualifies for a repair from a rebuild standpoint as a nonprofit, and who are the folks that qualify for that. Second to last is just, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on how we create a scope of work and build out our estimates, and show you all an example of an estimate that I have from a subcontractor, as well as the scope of work that I built from that estimate. So just to try to give you a little bit of an idea of what it looks like. And then we'll be sharing some of these documents with y'all as well. And then end is just wrap up, questions, comments, anything under the sun that y'all want to talk about related to these topics. So yeah, moving on. So to start out, how to choose the best subcontractor. So like Angela said, I am not, a construction expert per se. I would say I've had a few years of experience, but just general summary points and highlights of how I've chosen contractors in the past and how I've been guided by other construction department folks here at SPP how to do so. So just to start out, reminding everyone here, so contractors are, they're a business. Subcontractors are not in the nonprofit world. They're out to make money. That's what they're doing. They're making money. Yes, there are subcontractors that want to help people who are, vulnerable, but they still, in the end, it's, they gotta make ends meet. They gotta pay their crews. So they're about making money. So just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your relationship with subcontractors, and reminding yourself that there might be, that friendship or that emotional relationship, but in the end, it's a business and they're making money. Second thing here is transparency and expectation. So something that I've learned over the years that I've worked with subcontractors is the more transparent you can be right off the bat, transparent about the work that you do as in your organization, the folks you work with, in general, what we're expectations of what the subs are going to be doing, how they're going to be treating the homes that they're walking into. All of those things in turn lead to strong working relationships. If you start working with the subcontractor and you don't set the tone that, hey, a lot of our population is elderly and disabled. A lot of our population, has just experienced a bunch of trauma and they're emotionally unstable. And if you don't discuss that, it could lead to, crew members showing up, conversations being had, frustrations happening with the client. Perfect example I always like to say is one of our values at SBP is the mom rule. And you always want to leave a home as if it was your mom's home. And so I try to kind of relay that to the subs, or at least their supervisors, to the crew members. So they know that the expectation from me is that they respect the house as if it was their own mother's. So as cheesy as that may sound, we all work with people who are, at close to their breaking point, and we need to remember to share that with even our subcontractors and set that expectation up front. Pricing. So how to identify some reasonable job costs. So part of that is not only looking at your local Home Depot, Lowe's, maybe hardware store for general pricing on materials. I can tell you, with COVID and everything, things have constantly risen in regard to pricing, or certain things have risen and then gone down. So it's really important that you keep a running list, or at least a material list of basic costs for the items that you frequently purchase, or that your subs may purchase. So that could be lumber, drywall, shingles, just so you stay in the know with where pricing is sitting ever so often, and you're not getting ripped off. So that's something that I always recommend cross-checking. And then something that I will go into a little bit more detail, but we'll discuss right now is there is a platform called Xactimate, and it's a platform that SVP does use at times to kind of cross-check market rate pricing for not only labor, but also materials. Mind you, this is a platform that a lot of insurance companies use, but it's a way for us to cross-check subcontractors and their pricing and price gouging. Unfortunately, it's not something that we provide to our, grantees, but I would say if your organization, is dedicated to doing a certain amount of rebuild work, that they invest in this platform and maybe get trained on that platform. A few of y'all get trained on that platform. It's also not the end of the world if you don't have it. If you have, like I put in here, that your subcontractor labor costs, if you have that broken down, you can easily compare it to other subcontractor labor costs. And then with the materials, you can go and look on Lowe's website, Home Depot's website. I just like to put it in here as that's some way that I will check an estimate against my subcontractors, is by using this platform. So just some key takeaways when you're choosing a subcontractor. One, you want to ask a lot of questions, all of the questions. You are the one that will be paying the subcontractor. You have the money and you are paying them. So in turn, you can ask all of the questions under the sun. Don't hesitate. These are your funds that you are going to be paying someone to do a service for you. So when you're, getting an estimate back or getting a price back, ask questions. Why is this price? Why are you charging me this when, a sink at Lowe's is $30 and you're charging me $80, including labor? That's a little expensive. Why are you doing that? So don't be afraid to ask those questions, because it is your money that you're using to pay those subs. It's the grantor's money, but it's your money as an organization, and you're responsible for being, once again, cost efficient in how you're spending that. Second, I'm sure Angela has mentioned this, but you always want to get multiple bids. And what that means is, I know finding a reliable subcontractor is not easy, but you want to make sure you're doing right by our grantors again and getting multiple bids from multiple subcontractors to compare labor and material costs. This ensures that you're getting the best rate possible. And it also ensures you're not choosing a subcontractor that is going to overcharge you or have higher overall costs than maybe another subcontractor who is a little bit more reasonable and at market rate. So this is really important. And I'm gonna right next go over a couple of resources that are really key to finding some of those subcontractors. So maybe this will also help in your hunt to find reliable subs. Something that I like to use and we've used in the past to find subs is Angie's List. It's an online platform. I don't even know, I think it's a low cost monthly fee to be like a member of it, but it's worth it in my opinion, because you pay a small fee to have access to subcontractors that, pay to get rated, or they have folks rate them, and Angie's List vets them to put them on this platform to then share with, whether it's homeowners or other companies that need reliable subcontractors. And you can search, do you want a general contractor? Do you want an electrician? Do you need a roofer? All of those things are on there. And you can search for your area, what your need is, and then you can get their contact info and give them a call, email them. Not only this, but the Better Business Bureau, that also is a good reference. And then ask your local vendors. If you have a roofing supplier, if you have, maybe an account with Lowe's. I know one of the subs I found was through our account manager at Lowe's, SVP's account manager here in New Orleans. And he recommended a few subs that they have, that have accounts with him that are reliable, that would work well with a nonprofit. So don't be afraid to ask your vendors, people that, maybe do a lot of work, maybe your local barber shop has just had a remodel and they have, a residential contractor that they could recommend. So all of those things are helpful, but definitely if you're not pulling from like an Angie's List, get references, ask for references. Just like a normal job, like someone who's going to work for you, you want to get a reference for subs, because then you'll know if they are actually, good at what they do or what they say. And then I'm just going to continue to nail it. The transparency piece. The more you can set the tone and the expectation for your subcontractor, the better. Because if you've repeatedly set the tone and then they still continue not to follow what you ask of them, that's when you know that they're not going to work out. So it's very important to set that tone. And then the last piece is just, we do have a sample subcontractor onboarding packet that SVP requires all of its subcontractors to fill out if they do want to work with us. And in that we have some harassment policies, we have policies on payment and all of that, and when they would get paid, depending on what time that they submit their invoices during the week. So I'm going to have Angela share that, or I'll share that with y'all after the training. Just something it's almost like a contract and an agreement with your sub. So they're required to follow those things. So when COVID was the thing, we had a policy for our subcontractors with COVID, because they're going into folks' homes that are, vulnerable and elderly. So I will be sharing that with y'all as well. But before I jump to the next slide, are there any questions, Angela, that I need to answer?
No questions in the chat, but you guys, I know you're not a shy group. So if you have questions, feel free to jump in.
Is there been any conversation about getting some type of pricing reduction on estimating tools like Xactimate? Like if all of us came together and we were able to come up with, all right, we need 10 licenses between us, would SBP be willing to kind of lead those conversations to get some type of a discount?
I can try to answer that. And Hannah, maybe you know a little bit more about Xactimate because I'm not super in the know. I think that if collectively there was an interest in Xactimate training, we could have a conversation with them. I mean, right now we had like a very limit. They gave us like a few, I think it was like 5 to 10 trainings free, or I think it was like a reduced price for all of our national construction staff. I mean, and there were people who didn't get into that. So it was pretty limited, but if we had, you know, collectively 15 NGOs that could benefit from this, then yeah, I think we can say that to them. And that's something they may be interested in, they may not be, but I think it's worth an ask. So if there are a bunch of you that would find that really helpful, definitely reach out to me and I can start like putting something together. Hannah, do you know anything more about that? I mean,
I don't, but I do know that we, I think, receive a certain amount that are like no cost to us, but I don't see why if we put the ask in with it, you know, a larger group of nonprofits, why they couldn't reduce the cost of, you know, an annual like fee to have like an account and things like that.
right.
Yeah, definitely something. Good question, John. I think I don't see why it wouldn't be possible. We do excuse me, we do the Xactimate training itself with one of our partners, Farmers Insurance. They usually give us training at no cost on the platform. It's just us getting the platform that is the challenge. So I know the training piece, I don't think would be an issue because that's something that they offer to us. And I know that they would be open to supporting other nonprofits that do this kind of work. It's just getting the licenses figured out. So yeah. We'll come back with an answer on that.
Thank you.
And yeah, and I know too, a lot of you aren't able to really get to licensed and insured contractor bids for every project because of different reasons for everyone. But it would be great if you could see like the market rate cost for Xactimate and then just have your one bid, obviously that's like comparable. So I hear you and I see lots of people in the chat saying yes. So I'll put something together there, but yeah, reach out if you're interested.
Great. So now going on to damage assessments and just general construction walkthrough overview. So I'm going to remind y'all on a slide in a few just who qualifies in the type of construction that we're doing on these homes. So obviously, we always want to remember that we're only here to make the space safe, sanitary, and secure, and address storm-related damages. I say this all the time because I have to say it to our AmeriCorps members sometimes. Sometimes it may mean turning a blind eye or turning your head to neglected or deferred maintenance on a person's home. Things that to some of us may seem, you know, not sanitary or not safe, but in turn is just carelessness on the homeowner's part and not taking care of the home. So just keeping that lens on when you walk into homes and not addressing everything you may see. So it's really important, you know, whether you're walking the house or you're, you know, walking it with a sub or you're walking it with another coworker that maybe doesn't have construction experience. It's just important to pay attention to the storm related items and things that really maybe could be safety hazards, but not things that are just deferred maintenance. And that can be hard to look away at. Next thing, and I know Angela did touch on this with the client services kind of training, but we want to be transparent with the clients and the homeowners. So if you're walking a home and the client is there with you, whether they're with you or not, it's important to, be very direct in that, is this storm damage? Was this from hurricane, blah, blah, blah? Was it storm related? And if you ask them directly and they say yes, you have to trust that they're being honest. But there are things that they'll probably bring up and they'll say, oh, well, my windows are, old, and can I have, can you add that in? And it's the same, is it storm damage? No, I'm sorry, our funding only covers storm damage. That's our goal here, safe, secure, sanitary. We're not addressing old items, deferred maintenance. So even though your client services department or whoever that may be that's communicating with your clients, as the person going to the house, being the face of your organization, like walking through, the homeowner is going to ask you those things, and you need to be able to say, I'm sorry, this is everything we can do. If you have questions on the scope of work when we do create it, or, why we're only touching storm related items, please talk to your client services person or whoever that may be, however you call it in your organization. Super, super important, because the moment you might say, oh, maybe we'll consider this, then it opens up the floodgates for so many other things that they could want. So even though you're not maybe the client services person, you need to be transparent when you're there walking this house. Next is 5 steps that I kind of put into a concise list of how I would recommend walking a home, and things from my experience that I did not do sometimes and then had to go and do. So first is, you always want to get concise photos of the home. So when you're walking through a home the first time, you want to get room by room photos. You want to have up close photos of said damage, but you always want to have far away photos of the entire room, because I can say this from experience, once you leave that house, you're maybe not even going to remember what each room looked like, because you're probably going on a bunch of walks and you're probably talking to so many different people. You have other things on your mind. So when you're walking a house, be very concise and consistent about how you're walking it. Something I like to do is I will kind of walk through with the homeowner, let them show me what they say is storm damage, where the damages may be. I ask the questions if I have questions, and then I go back to the beginning and I start there with my photos, my measuring, my sketching, to better understand the layout of the house. So concise photos at close up and then from a distance. If you don't have either a cell phone or a camera or something that can take clear photos, you should get it. It's very, very important. That is something that has saved us in regard to a lot of discrepancies on damages that we initially assessed, that the homeowner then said, oh no, there was this too. And then you can zoom in on a photo and see, no, that wasn't there before. So concise photos. Walk every room in the home and walk the entirety of the exterior of the home. So what I mean by that is that initial walkthrough where the homeowner may show you, oh, this room, that room, and then not show you 2 other bedrooms that are off, maybe doors closed. I recommend you emphasize you need to see those rooms as well, only because what happens sometimes is you've gone through, you've assessed what you thought was all of the house, all of the damages, and then at the start file, the client may say, well, what about this room? There's mold in this room. And then you're like, well, you never told us that, you never showed us that. And maybe that particular day the homeowner forgot or they weren't thinking. So it's on us to assess every single room in the house, just to do our due diligence in making sure there's no mold, there's no active leaking, because sometimes the homeowners may not know. And this is where it can be challenging for houses that have a lot of stuff in them, because it's sometimes you can't see everything that's there with the amount of items. And to be fair, we've had clients that have so much stuff that we have to say, either you need to get this out or we can't help you because we can't see the extent of the damages. And in turn, we can't successfully assist you because we can't see or access all these areas. So walk every room. The exterior of the home is also important. I would say 80% of homeowners that I've met don't even know some of the exterior damage that they have on their house. If it's not, causing any leaking, or if they don't, happen to ever go in the backyard, or maybe they're disabled and they can't get to the backyard, it's our jobs to walk the perimeter and assess every single side of the home, whether it's siding that may have flown off, broken, rotted fascia, or maybe some, windows that have broken glass that the homeowner didn't notice. So definitely always walk your exterior of the home. Whether you choose to do that first, do it last, it needs to be part of your walk. Do not rush your damage assessments. I am very much guilty of filling my schedule. I'm on a timeline. I have things to do in my day. And sometimes, I push the limits to rush my walks or my damage assessments. Give yourself more than enough time. Whoever is scheduling this damage assessment for you or this walk, give yourself 15 or 20 minutes more than you think you'll need. You never know what's going to come up. You never know what you might need to really assess. And you want to have the most concise and full assessment possible, so you don't have to go back or spend time, pondering if you got everything or if you got all your photos. So slow down, don't rush it, move at a leisurely pace, but know that this is the most efficient way so that you don't have to go in reverse and go back to the house because you might have forgotten something. I kind of already went over this, but ask the client point blank, what is storm damage? If you look them in the eyes and they're willing to lie to you about something that, isn't storm damage, I mean, that's on their conscience, but we have to ask them directly, because if we don't, then we don't know. So don't walk around the house and say, oh, that's probably storm damage. Oh, that's storm damage, when maybe it's not. So it's our jobs to ask directly. And if for some reason the homeowner is not there, that's when you'll have to, get your kind of scope of work together and then work with your client services person to ask those questions directly to the client if for some reason they can't be present or aren't able to be physically present at the home. Always check your attics and foundations. This is, I can't take full credit for this one. This is definitely on Tommy. Something that we have learned in the past is these are two areas that are critical to check when you're on a walk. So reason being attics. So attics show a lot of unforeseen or maybe unknown damage. So one, if there's an attic access, we recommend you getting up there, or whoever you're with, subcontractor, should be getting up there. That's to see, is there wet insulation up there? What does the decking look like on the roof from the inside? Like, can we assess what the decking looks like to know the state of what might be severely damaged? You can see, maybe there's no wet insulation, but there's, some water damage on some of the drywall. So that gives you a better idea of where there may be storm related damages, to where you don't have to guess or you don't have to assume. It's another way to really discover and make sure you're covering all your bases. So bring a ladder with you, because there's not always a ladder. So super important there. Obviously, if you can access it, some houses don't have attic accesses, so it's kind of just, is what it is for those. Foundations. So something that I'm sure all of y'all have seen, but foundations, especially, I know you're not all in Louisiana, but we're kind of on a swamp out here. So foundations are a huge challenge for us post-storm. They're expensive to repair. they're something that is bigger usually than we can afford in a budget to repair. So it's always important to look if you feel a soft spot or if you see a bow in a subfloor going on the outside, if you can look and take a look under the house, maybe crawl under a little bit and get photos of what the joists may look like. Looking at what the foundation itself is made out of. Is it blocks? Is it beams? Is it covered in brick? You know, if you can see it, I recommend you taking a look at it, because at least here, you know, it's not only the fact that we are on a swamp, it's also termites and pests and things like that that cause additional damages. So these are two specific areas that if you are not looking at, your subcontractor should be looking at. So highly, highly, highly recommend that last step. And the last piece here, I want to stress, and I know not all of y'all have the most, the highest level of construction experience, but something that I think is also really critical into saving time on y'all's end, and also being able to really weed out the clients that the jobs that aren't feasible for us or for y'all, is doing what's called a pre-walk. So essentially that just means yourself or someone maybe that manages your construction, or even you and your client services person, someone that can get out to the house and walk it prior to your subcontractor or a subcontractor coming out there with you. That is only because in order to ensure the house is even something that you can rebuild or is a feasible project, you need to get your eyes on it first. You don't want to get to the point where you're leveraging a subcontractor's time and your time on what would be essentially like a step 3, when a step 1 is even making sure the house is feasible to do. So for example, there are a lot of clients and homeowners who have experienced a lot of trauma post-storm. That is, you know, something we all know. So it's not fair for us to assume that clients can successfully give us every aspect of their damages when we're doing an initial intake or when we're getting their info. It's our job to go out there and look at everything and make sure it's not, you know, a roof or framing of walls that is completely gone, or the foundation is sinking, or the back half of their house is just gone. Some of those things, you know, the clients don't know. So it's worth us getting out there and doing our due diligence instead of potentially pulling the client into a step where we think we could do the job, and then we get a sub out there and we're like, oh no, we can't do this. It's too expensive. Like, this is going to be too expensive. So part of what I recommend is doing that pre-walk. It's just to check some boxes, making sure everything, you know, is feasible. And it's also a space for y'all to create like a pre-scope of work. And then that will help set your subcontractor up for success. So you already know going in with your subcontractor, this is the scope. I've seen this house. These are the damages. Let's walk through this. This is what I recommend. This is what I think. What do you think? But it also allows for that step to be a little bit more efficient once you pull a subcontractor into it. And you're not discovering something new that you've never seen before because you haven't been to the house. But I do realize, you know, there is some kind of space where you might want to lean on your subcontractor with their experience, but I do believe that it's best to get your eyes on it first. Even if you don't have the best construction experience, I think we can all tell what is a missing wall, like on a house, or a foundation that's sinking when you can't even walk in. Some of that stuff is like pretty straightforward, but I do understand that there are things you're going to want to lean on your subs for, or some folks that may be a little bit more experienced with construction. But in order, I think, to ensure we're not pushing clients through that maybe their houses aren't fixable by a nonprofit, this is, I think, a step that is really, really critical. I'm going to stop there. Any questions, comments, thoughts, anything in the chat, Angela?
So I have one question about the name of groups that can help with removing items and belongings if someone has a lot of them. I don't like to say hoarders because I'm not, I don't have any psychology degree, so I feel like I can't be putting that on somebody. But I have a few groups in Houston that I remember working with, but I can't remember the name of them. So I'm just looking around. But as soon as I have the names of those agencies, I'll send them out just as like examples of groups and agencies that you can reach out to. So just give me a few minutes for that one. But that was the only question I saw. Anybody else?
I have one. On the foundations. So how do you handle it with your clients? If we do see a foundation, I have 2 homes right now that are in the same category. The subcontractor doesn't want to, there's definite storm damage inside the home. I mean, definite, but he doesn't want to do the work inside the home because there is an issue with the foundation. And that's going to be, the foundation repair is going to be double my budget for the home anyway. So he doesn't want to do the inside repairs because he can't warranty it because of the condition of the foundation. So how do you handle that with your clients when there's just because right now I'm at a standstill. I mean, I can't do work inside the home and I don't have the money for the foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, my recommendation, I guess, is kind of twofold. So if the foundation, so first, I guess, you sound like you've gotten us one subcontractor. I would say if you haven't gotten multiple subs or multiple recommendations or estimates from construction folks, I would start there because different subcontractors have different thoughts on foundation pieces and what they will or will not warranty. 2 is I would want to understand what is it that he's not warranting. Is it just some drywall and insulation that he needs to put back? Like, is there something that maybe your organization could warranty, or is there a scenario where we say, hey, your foundation right now is not the safest, but it's still solid. We can do this work, but we can't warranty everything because of the severity of your foundation. That would kind of be like that would be a little bit more challenging route, but I think starting with getting multiple subcontractors to look at it, because foundation work is really tricky, and until you get a few folks who may have experience with that, they'll know like what state it's at. So is it just yeah, there's some waviness in the subfloor, there could be some beams that maybe not the strongest, but it's still solid, it's livable, yeah, you can put some sheetrock up. Or is it to the point where it's like sinking and not really even safe to live in? Then I would say you have to explain to the homeowner that, hey, there's some serious foundation things going on. Unfortunately, we don't have the funds to do everything here and make sure it's livable for you. And then you have to deny them services. I mean, it's one of those things that you have to think back to the funds you have and all of the families you have that are in need. And if you were to spend any amount of money on this house and there's some part of it that's not safe and you can't have it you don't have it in your budget to fix it, I think that warrants a denial. And I don't know what program you're with, if there's a scenario for FEMA money at this time. If there's not, then I'm not going to go down. Yeah. So that's the other thing. If you don't have FEMA money as an option to kind of match that grant, that's also a challenge. So I would say start with getting, if you can, get some other opinions on it before fully ruling out, no, we can't do anything. Because that's going to be your best bet to be able to explain to the client that you've gotten 2 or 3 subcontractors, assessments, and the foundation needs to be repaired, but it's not in the budget and it's not in our, funding. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's helpful.
I'm
Thank
fairly
you.
new to this. Can you explain when you would fix the foundation and when you would not?
Yeah. So I would say, something that, foundation wise that I've done in the past is, if the house has been fully gutted, and typically it's gutted by our volunteers, that opens up, visibility to some of things, and it opens up the ability for a subcontractor to see, and potentially even do, say, a beam and some subfloor, or jacking up like a corner of the house. I would say for SBP, for us, it depends on the size of the home, the cost, the budget. Like, it really depends on a lot of things, because sometimes it's only a certain part of the house, and it's something that we could get to easily that is not as, it doesn't put us over our budget, I guess. And to speak to Sonia, the FEMA piece, I work in a program right now where we have FEMA as like funding towards, folks have home repairs funds to help lower our cost. So that also helps. But I would say if it's majority of the house, like over 50% of the house is just completely, sinking, it's to the ground, we wouldn't touch it. I mean, if we couldn't put a piece of drywall up without it cracking, in, the next few months or year, we wouldn't do it. And that's where I really look to our director of construction. I look to 2 to 3 subs to assess all that before ruling it out. So it's honestly a case by case basis, but I would say most of the time, when most of the house needs to be pulled up, like subfloor and everything, we don't touch it. If it's a small section, like we replace subfloor all the time, like that's super easy. It's the beams that get the labor costs are skyrocketing for those. So I don't know if that really answers your question, because I don't have a direct, like, this is when we do it and this is when we don't, but it really depends on funding and feasibility for that particular house.
Oh, that helps a lot. Thank you.
And then
So,
there was-
so
Go ahead,
Hannah,
Sandra.
how do you handle termite damage, active termite colonies?
Good question. I had some termite slides that I took off because it was a defined scope. So for us, we have kind of steps, obviously, we use to identify termites. So we look for, obviously the studs themselves, if we can see them, how severe it is initially, and then if there's any kind of like nests or holes in the drywall, specifically if the house isn't fully gutted, depending on how much of that we see, we'll actually have like one of our termite companies that we use come out and assess to see if there are active termites. Sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't. So it just depends on what we initially see, and it depends on if the house is gutted or not. So like if the house is gutted, you can pretty much see all of the interior, like all of your studs, to where you're able to understand the severity of your studs. Where it becomes a challenge is probably the scenario you're dealing with, where drywall is still up, you only have a small area to address. And that's where, I'm really looking at, and I can share some of my, I can share the slides with Angela to share with y'all, but just really looking at where those like nests or those holes might be, and also assessing, from the outside, is there access to where water is getting actively inside the house? Usually wherever there's a leak or an ability for water to get in, the termites will find their way inside. But depending on the severity, like in that scenario, I would add into my budget and into my scope of work, having someone come out and assess, and then also do a treatment. But we'll always just like check for an assessment. But once again, it just depends on, is your house fully gutted? Is it not? Does it seem like when you touch on the drywall, it's like paper, and likely, there's chewed up studs? Is there access for leaks? That's the biggest thing. And I definitely, that's something I do want, and I talked to Angela about this, have a more specific training on some of these like specific topics to dive deeper into, because I know termite damage is notorious for like all of our, I think every single job, there's always termite damage on these houses because people don't get treatments after years. But easy identifiers are those kind of pinholes, those holes in the drywall, active leaks where water is getting in. That's typically where they'll be. And just being able to identify if there is like, if you press on the drywall and it's pretty thin, or if it's moving, there's likely some kind of chewed up studs there. So hopefully that's helpful. It's not really a direct answer, but you know, it just depends on what you can see.
Well, sometimes it's helpful to know you're not alone. So it sounds like I'm not.
You're not, trust me, you're not. Yeah, you're not alone. It's a hard one for sure. But I think once again, like on here, when I talk about just don't rush your damage assessments, assess your foundation. Sometimes you can see like termite damaged joists on under your foundation, because that's where they'll get down there too. Or even in your rafters. I've seen it in rafters. So when you get in your attic, you might be able to see where they're chewing, you know? So it's important to, look at all of those areas.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Only other question, and then I think we can go on. Hannah, if you can talk about mobile homes and how, if you know, your assessments of mobile homes are following kind of a similar structure, or if it's different.
Yeah. So I did a lot of mobile homes, or I guess manufactured homes in Southwest Louisiana when I was there. I would say the assessment is relatively similar. Not really like attic access usually for those. The foundations are a little different because they're built differently, but they are easy to assess typically. I would say this just goes back to like the vulnerability. So in particular in Southwest Louisiana, I can tell you we did not rule out manufactured homes. We did assess them. We looked at them. We, checked to see, is it something that is feasible? It's similar to a regular home. I would say the challenge with manufactured homes is you can't always easily get the materials that go into a manufactured home easily. It is possible because I've done it. I've had subs find the particular, trim pieces or, battens or like they're basically like the wood that they use for like the ceilings because they're weirdly built. But I would say it's up to like how you choose as an organization if you want to rule out manufactured homes entirely, or if you choose to assess them. I think your assessment is very similar, but also know that like the value of those are probably, very low. But who is your client? Who are you looking at? Is this their home? They have nowhere else to go. They have 4 kids living. That was the situation. And for me is like, yes, it's a manufactured home. It probably has 0 value, but this is their home and they have nowhere else to go. And if I got to put a new roof on it and throw some sheetrock up, I'm saving them from being homeless or living in a moldy home. So I would say it just goes back to if you decide as an organization that you are going to support a manufactured home and it's something that you agree to as a group. I don't think, and Angela can speak to this, our funding specifically says you can't work on manufactured homes. I just think really assessing, what does it look like underneath? Because you can easily see, are the straps still down? Is the foundation still stable? Did the blocks move that the home was on? So I think all of those things are still valid for manufactured homes.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it for now. If we want to get going, I know there was some other questions, but we'll Hannah and I can address those offline, and I can put it all in the follow-up.
Okay. This one is pretty straightforward, and these are things that kind of speaking to what John was talking about with like termites, very similar to, these are identifiers that could really raise the cost of your overall job. So just a few tips for identifying mechanical, electrical, or plumbing issues on storm damaged homes that you're walking. So you always want to check out your mains. So when you're walking your homes, you want to look at your electrical like fuse box. You want to check the like the plumbing itself, like is it on, is it off, you know, is there an HVAC system in the house itself? Does it work? Does it not work? Is it just old? Do they have window units? Do they not? All of these things are items you should be asking questions about or looking at. You know, if you try to turn on the sink faucet or the kitchen faucet and nothing comes out, you can assume the water's off. But know that if you do decide to do this job, you want to make sure that that water is going to turn on and there's not going to be any issues with the plumbing. So check and see if there's galvanized piping, check if it's PEX or PVC, all of these things. You know, obviously I'm not a construction expert, but doing the simple steps of turning things on, checking, you know, asking the homeowner, has your electrical been working? Has it not? Have you checked it? Does your plumbing work? And everything may be off and they might not know, but you need to, that's where you as the construction person or said person needs to call someone out and assess those things. So that is important as well. So not just a general contractor, but you should get a plumber, an electrician, an HVAC specialist out there and look at these things, because you want to be able to see and identify bigger issues that could cause a problem or up your, you know, cost of your job or your budget. So don't feel like it's all on you. If you identify the few things, like, is the water on? What kind of plumbing? Did they have a working HVAC system? Did they not? Is the electrical on? What does the fuse box look like? All those things are helpful, basic, just boxes to check. And then moving on to calling a professional and getting someone out there to check all of that. Because it would really be unfortunate if you got to the point where you were about to close out the house and you had to replace a bunch of plumbing, or they realized, oh, we have to rewire this room. So try to foresee those things and get all of those things assessed ahead of time. So this is something that Angela already went over, and I just want to highlight again. So with all of this, know that the goal here is just to make the home safe, secure, and sanitary. So what work SBP can do / you know, its grantees, you know, any demo, mold remediation, interior repairs to make the home safe, secure, sanitary, livable, minor electrical, plumbing, carpentry work. What we don't do, basically specialty countertops, any garages, fences, sidewalks, any carports, sheds. We don't do anything that's not the, you know, sole damaged dwelling that someone lives in. We don't do any kind of appliances, we don't elevate homes, and we don't completely tear down a home and rebuild it again. So just like a refresher there, but always something to keep in the back of your mind when you're walking through a home, or when you're even talking to your subcontractors about what we do and do not do, because there are companies that level homes and nonprofits like us do not do that. So being transparent about what the scope of what we do and do not do is very, very important. So last kind of section here that I want to get through is just building a scope and estimate. So just a simple definition of what the scope of work is. So essentially it is the scope of work details the work that needs to be done and an estimate budget to repair the storm damage to make the client's home safe and sanitary again. So the scope of work simply just states room by room what it is that you as an organization are going to be doing for that client. Very straightforward, as specific as possible, but that is the scope of work, and that is what will be done for the rebuild. And then the estimate is essentially just, it will detail the cost of the project, broken down by phases of construction. So I'm going to show kind of an example of like an estimate from a sub, but essentially we'll share like SBP's template for estimates, and in that we have things broken down by phase. So your drywall phases, your painting phase, your roofing phase, your siding phase. You don't want to just have it as construction, you know, I'm just going to rebuild the house. You have to break it down by phases, because that's dependent upon labor costs and material costs by that phase. I'm just going to go on to the next slide and show you all this. So essentially building out a scope of work and estimate. So on the left is a little bit of like a screenshot of what our template for scope of work is. But essentially to build it out, you always want to start by going with the room by room method. So similar to how I talked about taking photos room by room, you want to also build your scope of work that way as well. Start with the name of the room and go line item by line item what you're going to be doing in that room. And another way to think about it is starting from demolition, like removing everything off the walls, treating it like almost like the process you would take to actually fix that room from start to finish in each section of your room line item. So if you're going to be demoing, that means you're going to remove the sheetrock, you're going to remove the insulation, you're going to remove all the nails, and then you're going to treat for mold, and you're going to kind of go back and put everything back. And that should be detailed in your scope of work. That way the homeowner knows and the subcontractor knows exactly what you want done, and the client knows this is exactly what's going to happen, as specific as possible. So that's the room by room. Obviously assess, measure, take pictures, kind of went over that in the walkthrough. You should be in every room assessing it, taking your photos and measuring that room to understand. If it's not you, your subcontractor should be doing that. That's how they're gonna be able to accurately give you a reasonable estimate. You always want to separate out general site options from per room specifics, meaning if you know you're going to obviously remove all the debris from the site when you're done gutting the house, or when you have trash, that shouldn't be put in every single room. It should just be a general site specific thing that your organization or your subcontractors are going to be responsible for removing all debris, all trash from the site. That's a general site thing. That's not room specific. That's just, you're going to do that. You're going to pull a permit, or your subs are going to pull a permit. That's a general site item. So all of those things need to be in your scope of work. Super important. Detail matters. If in one room you're only caulking and painting a window and around a wall or around a windowsill, that needs to be specifically put in there. If you just say paint the wall in this bedroom, well, what wall? Is it the window wall? Is it the wall when you first walk in? What wall? If you don't put detail in your scope, your client is not going to know what's being done. And in turn, that leaves room for discrepancy. That leaves room for them to ask for more. That leaves room for them to say, well, why not this wall? I thought you said this wall. So the more detail, the better. And then simplicity for homeowners. That essentially means, use layman terms, dumb it down, put, drywall instead of sheetrock, or put ceiling insulation instead of R30. They're not going to know what R30 means. So dumb it down. I mean, that's the way people are going to understand what you're doing. Make it simple, but detailed. And once again, I'll go through a sample of this as well. And then estimate. So like I said before, always reference your material costs from Home Depot, Lowe's, your local hardware store, your local roofing supplier, lumber company. That's how you're going to know, what is market rate for these things in my area. That way you can check it against your subcontractor. Create an individual template. So this is something that, like I said, we can share our template, but it may be worth y'all having your own material lists with costs added in. So you already know, hey, I know lumber costs this per 2x4, or I know shingles per bundle cost this. Obviously, we're all in different areas. So what something may be in Louisiana, it may not be in Texas or something like that. So it needs to be specific to where you're at and where you're located. Price compare platforms. So we already kind of discussed this, like getting an Xactimate account or having some kind of way to compare your labor costs. If you ask your subcontractor specifically, please, I want to know what your labor is to hang drywall, or what is your labor per hour to finish drywall, or to do the roof, replace the roof and remove the shingles. So all of those things are important. We're going to figure out the Xactimate license piece, but nonetheless, there should be something that you can compare your subcontractor estimate to market rate prices. And I already spoke to the labor costs. It's super important to understand what your subcontractor is charging for labor. That's the only way you're going to be able to understand how they're charging you. So with that, I wanted to share y'all on the, I can't even, so sorry, I'm trying to, there we go. So I know we're kind of getting down to our last few minutes. So this is an example of a estimate that I received from my subcontractor. And once again, this is through Xactimate, like we spoke about. So it's pretty detailed, but this is probably on the highest level of detail and pricing and breakdown per room that you're gonna want. So this first page just is like the basic info from the sub, nothing, critical here. But then here we start with the breakdown by room or category. So when my subcontractor does his estimates, he'll always start with the roofing section. So in the roofing section, this includes line item by line item what he is going to do. So he adds in, this is line item 1, removing the shingles, and puts in how many squares are on this roof and the unit price per square to remove those shingles. And then in the next line item, he's putting back the shingles and he's adding in the cost to put those shingles back. And then he adds some additional squares for waste, essentially. And then here, and this is also what's key, is we have, donated materials. So we have donated ice and water shield. And so in here, he puts, SVP is going to supply this amount of ice and water. So he's only charging me the labor to install it. He's not charging me the material of that ice and water. And then it goes down, line item by line item, like all the pieces of the roof. Obviously, like I said, this is very specific. Angela does not expect y'all to have, every single one to be this detailed, but there still should be some specifics to the roofing. It shouldn't just say, put a new roof on, $10,000. Like, how much are they going to charge you for the labor? This is why you guys need to understand like what your labor costs are going to be for this specific scope or phase of construction. Just another, like, remember how I spoke about hauling debris off? Like, this is why he's putting it just in the main level. So just to haul, you know, the debris, he's charging us, you know, one dump fee of $161. So that's something like specific to the general job itself. It's not specific to like a bedroom. But then you have here master bedroom. And this is exactly what all that we're doing in the master bedroom. We're doing some, basically this is just masking or covering the area, the space, so they can paint and treat certain things. This is to move materials around, content manipulation. So he charges us, you know, for his guys to move furniture around as needed. Detaching and resetting a ceiling fan to then texture the drywall and then seal the ceiling with stain blocker. So very specific, very brief. Obviously, I would not ever give this to a client and say, here's your scope of work, because who's going to understand content manipulation? What does that exactly mean? I don't understand what that means, versus moving furniture around so we can get to areas and fix your damaged ceiling. So just as examples, this is from a subcontractor, goes through the unit prices. And then at the very bottom, I just want to show y'all, you know, here he puts his overhead, his profit. So I know this is, you know, just labor and material. And then this is his overhead, his profit. And I can do the math of like what his percentages are for that per job. And then at the bottom, this lays out specifically general categories. Like, remember how I talked about the phases of construction? So like demolition. So this is his like total cost for like that phase. So he's charging about $3,000 to demo certain things on this job. So when I'm breaking down my estimate internally, I can say demolition material, or not material, I guess you could say materials, there aren't really many costs to demo outside of trash bags maybe. But the labor is about $3,000. Obviously depends on how many hours, and maybe he's charging per the square foot, but generally, you know, demo is about $3,000 for this job. So when you're building your estimate, you know, this phase is demo, it's going to cost about $3,000 to hang sheetrock, or maybe finish sheetrock, about $500, $600. So just examples of the specific phases. And then he also includes a sketch. So this is something that, you know, y'all could do on your own when you're pre-walking your job, but this is just a general sketch of the areas we are working in. If it ends up being the whole house, sometimes we do include the whole house, but if it's just one room or two rooms, I don't expect him to, or myself, to have a sketch of the entire house if we're only touching one room. Too much time to do that. But so this is just an example of like a very, very specific estimate, but the critical points here are it's broken down by room, and it's easy for us to see, you know, what he's charging for pricing, to where we can compare easily to another estimate. I wanted to show you guys, this is an example of our scope of work template. So this is SBPs. This is what our clients see. So I will go in, and after I do a pre-walk myself, I build out a scope of work room by room. So I have an idea of what I would like done, or what I think needs to be done on the house. And then I have this ready to share with my sub, to then have my sub build out what they need to build an estimate. And then once I finalize all of that, we use this in our start files to read through with the homeowner, and they keep a copy of this. So just generally, we have a client name, the address, and we'll put typically the estimated cost, so the client knows how much the cost of their job is. We go over special notes, what the specific condition of the property is, if there's any hazards like mold, or maybe there's pests or things like that. Summary of work, and then the general conditions are those things that I kind of spoke to that aren't specific phases. So pulling permits, supervision, providing services like a dumpster, portalet, and like the homeowners from our program, they're responsible for maintaining their utility bills and their utilities. Just all of these things that are just general notes that we go through with the homeowner. And then, like I said, room by room. So like, just like Breckenridge's most recent estimate, he has roofing. So I broke it down by roofing. I pulled notes from his estimate, but I broke it down by roofing, exactly like what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be removing, replacing any storm damaged soffit and fascia on the outside of the house, anything like that, specifically like laying out like, where are these soffit vents? Oh, it's on the right side and the rear side. Be as specific as possible. In the kitchen, you know, assess and repair 2 outlets. I didn't just say 2 outlets that are not working and leave it at that. I put the one to the left of the sink and the one to the left of the fridge. So the homeowner has no, you know, confusion on what we're talking about. And it goes line item by line or room by room. You know, subs will need to cover and move furniture as needed. So people know that this is, they're going to cover and move your furniture as needed. Specifically, you know, kills damaged ceiling, detach reset ceiling fan, paint the entire ceiling, 2 coats, will match the color as best as possible. So be specific, you know, don't just say in your mind, you might know the scope, but your client needs to know the specifics and the detail. So when the time comes that you're under construction or you're at the end of it all, you can reference back to this and say, you signed this, this is what it said. We didn't say we are going to paint your entire room. We said we're only painting the ceiling 2 coats. And we didn't say it was going to match perfectly. We said we would match it as best as possible. So, yeah. Anyone have any questions? I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I know we're a little bit past time, but want to know if y'all have any questions. I went through a lot.
Do you share your cost estimates or just your scope of work with the client?
For the program that I manage, we don't share the specific estimates. There's not a reason we can't. I just don't do it. I know what we do is when we're filing a FEMA appeal, we put those estimates in it, and then the client sees that packet and has to sign it to put in a FEMA appeal. So they see the estimate, but I would say we very rarely give the estimate to the client, but it's not something that we can't do if they want it. But I think like that Xactimate estimate, it's so like, if I hadn't had Xactimate training, I didn't understand a lot of that language. So sometimes I think it's confusing, but the SBP estimate template, I think is a little bit more user-friendly, but it still has like, it has construction codes on it, and it has a lot of details that I think aren't as layman terms, I guess, as the scope. But yeah, we don't normally share it, but it's definitely something that I think if folks wanted to see like cost from a sub, I don't think it's something we can't share.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. From New York and New Jersey too, we never shared cost for projects because of, I think, a lot of different reasons, but we feel and we know that we're getting the best cost for X project. I think that homeowners don't always understand everything that goes into it, and they're going to have like a feeling on us paying too much or paying too little, or thinking, oh, well, if I have $20,000 to work with, I'd rather you spend $20,000 on these things instead of these things. And I had that a lot. So we just never shared cost. If they asked us cost and there was like a good reason why they might need that or whatever, then we could talk about it. But like, as a rule of thumb, at least for the Northeast, like we never shared cost.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. Other questions? And Hannah mentioned it, but I just want to reiterate, I'm going to include the Xactimate copy for you guys to take a look at. Hannah, we had a question about if we could include the SBP scope and estimate. We can definitely include those. And then the subcontractor onboarding information I'll include, as well as, I still can't remember this name of this Houston NGO we worked with, so I'm still on the trail for that, but I'll get that over to you guys too. Other questions? Anything else? Let's see what we have in the chat. We have some. Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad this was helpful. Probably all of it wasn't new or groundbreaking, but maybe there were some nuggets in there that are helpful. All right, well, I will send this out to everybody as I do, and then we'll see everybody here next Thursday for part 2 of FEMA. Yeah, really appreciate you all hanging around with us and asking great questions. So again, another great session, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks, Hannah.